Welcome back to the Snowpoint Cast. Today we're going to be talking about a deck from 2010 called Flyterra. Flyterra got top 32 at the World Championships. A guy named David Sturm from Germany got top 32 with it. Yeah, let's get right into it. So we're going to start off with 3 Trapinch. Trapinch has 2 attacks, the first of which is called Inviting Trap. So Inviting Trap just lets you switch the defending Pokemon with one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Really nice for stalling out. Like if you're versus like an SP deck, they can pressure you really fast. So being able to get their optimal attacker out of the active is definitely nice. And then Sand Tomb for a fighting, it does 10. And then the defending Pokemon can't retreat. So, you know, it's got 50 HP, single retreat, resistance to lightning, and a water. Decent attacks on a basic. Definitely both useful in niche situations. You do play that fighting energy, so you can get that off if you need to. You also play 2 Vibrava. So Vibrava's got 70 HP, a single retreat, a resistance to lightning, and a weakness to colorless because it's dragon type. So the first attack and the better attack of the 2 is Energy Typhoon. So it does 20 times the number of energy cards in your opponent's discard pile, and then they shuffle those energy cards into their deck. So depending on what kind of board situation you're in, being able to Energy Typhoon for like 4, if you can get 4 off and you're versus something that's dragon weak, definitely an interesting single energy attack that's good to know. Quick attack is okay as well, so for DCE it does 20, flip a coin of heads it does 20 more, but Energy Typhoon is definitely a decent attack that can be used in niche situations. You also play 4 Flygon from Rising Rivals. So Flygon from Rising Rivals has free retreat, which is really nice, and then it's got 120 HP, a resistance to lightning, and a weakness to colorless dragon. So it's got a Poke body called Rainbow Float. Rainbow Float essentially says if you have a basic energy card attached to Flygon, all of your Pokemon in play of that type have free retreat. So really, really nice, especially because the Pokemon in this deck have a ton of retreat, like 4 or 3 or 2, and you just like can't afford to be paying that retreat. So being able to just retreat them for free is a really important part of this deck. It's got 2 attacks. The first of which is called Sandwall. Sandwall is a really good attack. 40 for a DCE. Discard a stadium your opponent has in play. If you do, prevent all effects of attack, including damage done to Flygon during your opponent's turn. So depending on the matchup, your opponent has to drop stadiums a lot, like especially versus Gyarados. So being able to get that free 40 damage in before you're able to hit the second hit for a knockout can be really essential versus decks like that. It's got another really good attack as well. So Power Swing does 60 and then 10 more damage for each evolved Pokemon on your bench. You max out at 110 with that if you have every bench slot filled and an evolved Pokemon. But actually you max out at 130 because you play Expert Belt. So that's a lot of damage for a DCE and another energy attached. Definitely a really powerful attacker in Flygon. So I also play a Flygon level X. So the level X is really solid as well. It's got 140 HP, free retreat, resistance to lightning, and a weakness to colorless or dragon. And the Poke body is really strong. So the Poke body is called Wind Erosion. As long as Flygon is your active Pokemon, discard the top card of your opponent's deck between turns. So if you're doing a lot of damage, first of all, you're putting a lot of pressure on your opponent's board. Wind Erosion, having that deck pressure as well, saying, okay, I'm going to start taking out stuff on your board. I'm going to start swinging for 110 for 3 energy. And then also I'm going to start discarding resources from your deck. So potential stuff that you might need is going to the discard. So Wind Erosion is really good. The attack on Flygon level X is really strong as well. So for 3 colorless extreme attack, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon level X and it does 150 damage to that Pokemon. So that kills almost every level X in the format. It's not every level X. The one you play in this deck, there's a different level X that has 160 HP, so you're just short of knocking that one out. But it kills almost every one, like every relevant one, it definitely kills. So we're going to get into the Torterra line now. So you play 2 Turtwig. Turtwig has 50 HP. First attack for 1 is called Leech Seed. So it does 10. If it does any damage to the defending Pokemon, heal a damage counter. The second one's Ram for a DCE, it does 20. You know, meh attacks, definitely not as good as the ones on a Trapinch. Single retreat, resistance to water, and a weakness to fire. And then you also play one of the Grotles. So Grotle has 90 HP, 2 retreat, a water resistance, fire weakness, and it's got 2 attacks. So the first one for a grass and a colorless, it does 30. It's called Razor Leaf, meh. And then the other one for grass, double colorless, sleep powder for 50. Flip a coin of heads. The defending Pokemon's down asleep. It's kind of unfortunate when Pokemon prints like Prevos that don't have good attacks, especially like compared to the Flygon's Prevos. They're a ton better than the ones on the Grotle and the Turtwig. Okay, so you play a split on your Torterras. So you play one of the Grass Torterra. So Grass Torterra has 140 HP, 4 retreat, no resistance, and a weakness to fire. Giga Drain is the attack that is really good on this card. So for a Grass DCE, it does 40. And then you remove all the damage from Torterra that you did. So if you do 40 damage, you heal 40. If you did 60, you heal 60. You do play expert build as well. So being able to buff your HP by 20 and then heal 60 every time you attack is really strong. Land Crush for a grass, 3 colorless, it does 80, definitely a decent attack as well. So you play this Torterra as well. The difference between these Torterras is one, the type. So having a fighting type attacker in your deck is definitely really nice. And also it's got a power. So Sunshine Song is the power. Once during your turn, when you play Torterra from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may choose as many of your grass Pokemon play as you like. For each grass Pokemon you chose, search your deck for an evolution card that evolves from that Pokemon and evolve it. So the only grass Pokemon that you play that evolve is the Turtwig line, and you need to have one of them out to do the Torterra. So the only, like, I mean, you can get a Grotle with a Turtwig, but it's much better if you can like candy out this one, because then if you have a Turtwig in play, you can go candy this one, it's evolving, use Sunshine Grace to find the Grotle, and then next turn you can just evolve into the Torterra without having to worry about finding the candy. You know, mediocre ability considering, or power considering how little grass Pokemon you play in the deck, but there are situations where it's okay. So 2 attacks. Crash Impact is the first attack. So for a DCE, it does 60, which is really solid. Like being able to deal 60 fighting damage for a DCE is good. And then Torterra does 20 damage to itself. So, you know, meh that you do 20 to yourself, but the value that you get out of DCE for 60 to do fighting weakness is really good. It also forces your opponent to switch to defending Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon, if any, which is kind of nice as well. Sometimes your opponent has something in the active that you really don't want to have there, and you have the ability to like mess around with your opponent's board because of Torterra level X, which we're going to get to in a sec. So the other attack that it has is called Land Shake. So for 2 grass, 2 colorless, it does 80. During your opponent's next turn, when your opponent puts a basic Pokemon from his or her hand onto his or her bench, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. So I mean, pretty decent, especially if you're early to mid game where your opponent's still going to be benching Pokemon. That's definitely solid. For retreat as well, this Torterra does have a resistance, so it's resistant to lightning, and then a weakness to water. So you play one of the Torterra level X's as well. So Torterra level X has 160 HP, which is like the fattest level X that exists. For retreat, and interesting, okay, so this is the only time that I've seen this on a level X. Often, like almost every single level X that I've seen has ×2 weakness, but this one has +30 to fire, so that's kind of interesting. Actually, I didn't notice that until right now. So for retreat, yeah, Forest Murmurs is the power. Forest Murmurs is really, really good. Once during your turn before you attack, if you have more prize cards left than your opponent, you may choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and switch it with the defending Pokemon. So essentially, if you're losing the game, every single turn you get a catcher effect or a gust of wind effect. So being able to just move around your opponent's board, and you know, something cool that you can do with Forest Murmurs with the Flygon level X, you have the potential to mill your opponent out. So if you're ahead but your opponent has like 7 cards left in deck, you have the potential to just go, okay, Forest Murmurs, bring up like a Claydol or something fat with 2 retreat, and then just sit there. And if you don't have an answer within 4 turns, you just lose the game. So that's kind of an interesting part about Forest Murmurs.
So Vigorous Dash for 3 grass and a colorless does 100 and snipes 30 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So pretty good. You know, you can like Crash Impact, force your opponent to switch, and then snipe the Pokemon that you hit with the Crash Impact to kill it, and like get double knockouts and stuff like that. So definitely a good attack.
Okay, so getting into the support Pokemon. So you play 3 Baltoy. Baltoy has 50 HP, a single retreat, and a weakness to grass. Psychic Balance is the attack on the card. It's actually a solid attack. So if you have less cards in your hand than your opponent, draw till you have the same number of cards as your opponent. So if you start with a Baltoy and like nothing else but an energy, at least you can do something. You can use Spin Turn because you play a fighting energy. Switch Baltoy with one of your bench Pokemon, but definitely not an attack you're going to find yourself using a lot. And then Claydol, you play 3 Claydol as well. You play Claydol for Cosmic Power. Cosmic Power says, once during your turn before you attack, you can take up to 2 cards from your hand, put them to the bottom of your deck, and then you draw up until you have 6. So really, really solid consistency, and it's staple. Like a ton of the decks in this format play a 1/1 or a 2/2 or a 3/3 of Claydol. I like 3/3 in this deck because it just keeps you consistent, especially with the amount of like Pokemon search that you have. Playing a 3/3 Claydol line lets 1 or 2 die, and then you still have that option later in the game. Okay, so you play 1 Nidoran from Rising Rivals. So Nidoran has Scratch for 10, single retreat, and a weakness to Psychic. And then the other attack that's actually pretty good that it has is Offer Help. So for a DCE, search your deck for a supporter card. For 2 colorless, you're not often going to be using this attack, but if you start with a Nidoran and a DCE and nothing else, at least you can get going. You play one Nidorina as well. The Nidorina has 80 HP, 2 retreat, a weakness to psychic, and 2 attacks. So the first attack is called Jump Tackle. It does 30, and then it does 10 damage to itself. And you don't apply weakness or resistance to the damage. So 1 for 30 is like, okay. Stress Poison is the other attack. So for a Psychic and a DCE, it does 40. If Nidorina has any damage counters on it from Jump Tackle, it does 40 plus 20 more damage. So being able to hit for 60 is actually kind of cool, but it's not often that you're going to be able to do the Jump Tackle into Stress Poison combo. It just doesn't come up that often. Okay, so you do play a Nidoqueen as well, and that's the reason you play this Nidorina line, as for the Nidoqueen. So Maternal Comfort is amazing with Rainbow Float. So 120 HP, 3 retreat, resistance to lightning, and a weakness to psychic. So Maternal Comfort says anytime between turns, remove 1 damage counter from each of your Pokemon. So that has a ton of synergy with Rainbow Float, because if everything in your deck has free retreat and everything in your deck is like a stage 2 with like 120 to 140 to 160 potential HP if you have Expert Belts or the Torterra out, being able to switch between those Pokemon is crazy, because you can go like Rainbow Float, switch to a Flygon, attack something, switch something else. And like you have so many attacking options as well. Like with the Flygon and the Torterra both being such good attackers, you can like hit something. Oh, my Torterra is about to die. I'll just Giga Drain and heal that off. So you have a lot of options with Nidoqueen's healing, and it definitely just keeps your board alive for a long time. 2 attacks on the Nidoqueen. They're both definitely decent. The first one is called Mega Punch. So for a Psychic, you do 40. And then the other one is called Ruthless Tail, which is, in my opinion, the better attack, the one that you use a little bit more in this deck. So for a Psychic Double Colorless, it does 50, and then 10 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So both really solid attacks, and you play Psychic Energy in this deck as well. So you do usually end up attacking with Nidoqueen at some point in the game, especially if you're playing against a Psychic weak deck. Okay, so you play a Spiritomb as well, just to keep you consistent. It's another Pokemon consistency. Spiritomb has a Pokebody called Keystone Seal. So if it's the active Pokemon, either player can't use trainer cards. So that's definitely really good to chill early while you set up. You play a lot of stage 2s, so being able to Darkness Grace onto those while everyone's trainer locked is nice. And then Darkness Grace is the attack. So for free, search your deck for a card that evolves from one of your bench Pokemon, put it onto that Pokemon, and then put a damage counter on Spiritomb. So really, really solid Pokemon. If you have nothing but like a Rosanne's Research or a Bebe's and an Energy, you can kind of slow the game down by chucking a Spiritomb active and just setting up your board. You also play an Azelf from Legends Awakened. So 70 HP, single retreat, and a weakness to Psychic. You play it for its Poke Power. So the Poke Power is called Time Walk. When you play Azelf from your hand to your bench, you can search your prizes for a Pokemon card, put it in your hand, and then switch a card from your hand with your prize. So really, really good. I mean, you play a lot of like 1-ofs in this deck that are important. Like the 1-of Flygon is level X is pretty important. The Torterra can be really important as well. And the Nidoqueen as well. Like there's just a lot of moving pieces. Something interesting about 2010 is like with the level X lines, a lot of the times what you'll find is instead of playing like a 4-2-4, the level X counts as one of the Pokemon. So you can't play a level X and 4 Flygon. You have to play 3 Flygon and a level X. So what the Pokemon lines are often they're like a 3-2-3. And this one's like a 2-1-2, but in Gengar, the Gengar plays level X as well. It's just like a 3-2-3. And so something interesting about that is you have to have a thinner line because of the level X. And so Azelf just keeps that consistent, even though you're playing that thinner line. And you play an Uxie as well. So Uxie, 70 HP, single retreat, weakness to Psychic. Weakness to Psychic. Setup is the power that you play it for, so setup's really powerful. When you bench Uxie from your hand to your bench, you can draw up to 7. So drawing up to 7 is really good, especially when you have like Rosanne's. You can just get a Rosanne's and an Energy, and then all of a sudden you're drawing cards. The Azelf, I didn't mention this, but the Azelf has an attack as well. So lockup does 20, and then your opponent can't retreat. Good to know that you have that, because you do play Psychic Energy, and there are turns, especially when you have that option to mill, that like having your opponent just chill and draw cards can be really bad for them. So yeah, Psychic Restore is the attack on Uxie. So does 20, and then you can put Uxie and all cards attached to the bottom of your deck. So being able to get that out of play can be really good, especially because there's a lot of decks that feed off sprites chilling on your bench. Okay, we're gonna get to the trainer cards now. So starting off with 4 Rare Candy. This is the 59 out of 60 cards in the list. So David played 1 Bronzong E4. So I'm not a huge fan of the E4 Bronzong. He did a tournament report, like an article, and he said that it won him his nationals, but I actually think that card is kind of bad, and it's a wasted slot in my opinion. But instead of that, we're playing 4 Rare Candy, which is really good in my opinion. 4 Rare Candy is awesome, especially when you play 3 different stage 2 lines in a deck. So 4 candy just keeps you consistent. The rare candy rule in 2010 says you can bench a Pokemon and then rare candy a stage 2 in the same turn. So being able to max out your odds for hitting turn 1 candies is really, really good, especially when sometimes you just like have a Flygon, and when you can play out cards and get your hand down, you can Claydol for even more, and then you're more consistent. So yeah, 4 candy is definitely really solid, and I wouldn't change that back. This is like one of the times, there's a lot of times in my deck list videos where, you know, it's like 59 out of 60, but it can be argued either way. I actually think that Bronzong is strictly wrong compared to 4th candy. Okay, so you play 2 Expert Belt. Expert Belt is really good in this deck, so it buffs your damage by 20. It's a Pokemon tool card, you attach it, and then it buffs your damage by 20 and your HP by 20. So if you chuck that on a Flygon, you're at 160 HP, which is like really whack. And if you put it on a Torterra, you're at 180, which is pretty much, you know, if your opponent is playing this deck and they get out a Torterra that's attacking with Giga Drain with an Expert Belt, you probably lose because they're healing 60 damage a turn and they have 180 HP, and they can be potentially moving around cards on your board. So this deck can get really scary once it sets up, especially with that Giga Drain and Expert Belt. Yeah, Expert Belt's really strong. We play 2 Pokemon Communications. So Pokemon Communication, in my opinion, is one of the better cards in this deck. I kind of would like to see a 3rd one because you play 27 Pokemon, which is like kind of a ridiculous amount of Pokemon. Almost half of your deck is Pokemon. So, you know, almost every time you have a communication in your hand, you're going to have some Pokemon that you can't use, and being able to just put it back into the deck and then get another Pokemon out just makes you really consistent when you play this many different Pokemon lines. You play Warp Point as well. Warp Point says your opponent switches their active with one of their bench Pokemon, and then you switch your active with one of your bench Pokemon. It doesn't really matter that you switch because of Rainbow Float. What you can do is like you Warp Point your opponent, see what they do, and then you can, if you want to play out more of your turn to see what you get, you can put something up with that's the same type as a basic energy you have attached to Flygon, and then just chill and see what you get the rest of your turn. So Warp Point's really good. Play a Night Maintenance as well. So Night Maintenance says shuffle 3 in any combination of basic energy cards and Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck. So getting that Pokemon recovery is really important, especially when you play those thin lines. Sometimes you need to get your level X's back. Sometimes your opponent kills a bunch of Claydols early and you need to get that back. And just having your Pokemon recovery is good. You play a Luxury Ball as well. Pretty staple in most decks in this format. Luxury Ball searches for any Pokemon in the deck that isn't a level X Pokemon. Searches for 25 out of 27 Pokemon, which is a really, really good card. And just being able to just play that as a trainer, you know, anytime you want, you can just find a Baltoy or find a Trapinch or find an Uxie. It just keeps you really consistent. We're getting to the supporter cards now. We're going to play 4 Rosannes. Just to be consistent, Rosanne's is great because you play a bunch of different types of basic energy. You play 3 different types of basic energy, so being able to find the one that you need to retreat can be really good, but also just to attack, attach them to the correct attacker. Yeah, so Rosanne's is awesome in this deck. You play 4 Bebe Search as well. So Bebe Search says take a card from your hand, put it on your deck, and then search your deck for a Pokemon to put in your hand. That's your level X search. Pokemon Comms also find level X, but Bebes are your consistent level X search, and they honestly just find anything in your deck. And being able to search Pokemon when you play Pokemon setup, like Claydol is Pokemon setup. You only play 8 supporters because you play a 3/3 Claydol line. So what you really want is 2 Claydols on your bench, and then you hopefully don't need supporters at that point. Hopefully you're just drawing through your deck well enough that you're hitting the energy and the stuff that you need. Okay, so getting into the energy cards now. So you play 3 Grass. Grass is mainly for Torterra, but the nice part about Flygon is it's colorless, so you can use any color energy on it as well. Having that free retreat on Torterra is really important because it has 4 retreat, and 4 is just, if you ever have to retreat for 4, like discarding a DCE and 2 other energy is, never do that. Definitely just let that Torterra die and stop attaching to it instead. So yeah, 3 Grass. 2 Psychic Energies. So this gives free retreat to your Nidoqueen, which has 3 retreat, and your sprites as well. And being able to attack with the Nidoqueen is definitely nice. So you play 2 just because you do have attackers that use that Psychic type. And you play 1 Fighting Energy. So the 1 Fighting Energy is mainly, okay, so you can attack with Trapinch with it. That's a thing that you can do, but that's not the reason you play it. You play it so that when you have it attached to Flygon, your Claydols have free retreat. Something that's a really common strategy in this format is to bring up a Claydol. Because it has 2 retreat, it's kind of difficult to switch out unless you have like a hard switch out in your hand. So being able to just attach that Fighting Energy to a Flygon and then being able to get free retreat is really nice. Fighting Energy also gives the Stormfront Torterra free retreat. So having a free retreat on that guy is definitely good as well. So you play 4 DCE. Your main attackers in this deck all use DCE. Torterra uses DCE, Nidoqueen uses DCE, and Flygon uses DCE. So you play 4 just so you're consistent. It's a really good card. Honestly, probably the most broken card Pokemon's ever printed. Really, really good card. And you play 4 Call Energy as well. So Call Energy says, if this energy is attached to your active Pokemon, you can activate Call, and Call ends your turn, but you get to search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench. So that's really good on a Spiritomb start. If you can start switch into a Spiritomb and then call it, that's really good. Being able to just have that in your start hand and then search for basic Pokemon. This deck relies on finding Pokemon. So if you're not finding Pokemon, you're not setting up, and then you're probably losing. And Call is just one of those things that keeps you really consistent. Okay, so this has been Flyterra from 2010. If you have any questions, definitely leave them below, and I'll do my best to get back to them. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.